Hello, History 325. My name is Bernadette Gray, and this is my project presentation. My first source that I have is Hector St. John de Crevecoeur, Letters from an American Farmer, that were written to his friend in England. In the letters, 1 through 3, Crevecoeur describes his views of um, the way people in North America lived. And Crevecoeur seemed to be very proud of living in America. He describes America as a modern, peaceful, and benign place. But by the time the 12th letter was written, he gives an inside view of um, how he felt torn between the British, the American revolutionists, and also the Native Americans. Um, so it was interesting to just hear or to read um, the letters that he wrote. And the reason I liked him was in our Becoming America book by John Butler. When I would read his letters, I was just kind of like, he seemed like a normal guy, and it was interesting to just read his letters. That kind of made you understand what life was like back then. Um, he also really adored his wife because he talks about her a lot in there too. Uh, the next person is James McCullough, and his letters and memoirs from colonial and revolutionary America. Um, he was a Scots-Irish farmer and a weaver, and he kept a diary from 1748 to 1758. And the diary consists of random accounts of his farm work, his weaving activities, religious reflections, and a record of casualties from the French and Indian Wars. McCullough was a native from County Londonderry, and then he paid passage for him and his wife Martha, and they arrived in the New World, and they arrived in Delaware. And in his diary entries, they're very valuable because there wasn't a lot of evidence that survived from back then, especially because of the attacks from the Indians. They left their village and because they were under attack, and they would just the Indians would decimate their village, and then they would come back, and they would come back to nothing, and would have to start all over again. And during that time, two of his sons actually were kidnapped by the Indians, and then eventually were released. So it was interesting to read what everyday life was like for him as a farmer and a weaver. And so his diary had these um, these entries of just little things that he would write down, like who he paid to for his little weaving material or whatever, and then who he paid, and like what the weather was like, and just all kinds of little entries that he would write. Some of them were even they were really hard to decipher, but some of them were even in code, and he talked or he wrote little codes, but very hard to understand. And so it was interesting to see, his to to look at his diary. And the next source that I have is uh, Milka Martha Moore. And Milka, her book is a collection of writings of more than 50 years, and it was produced by a group of Quaker women. And what they did was, and they lived in Philadelphia, and what they did was they all gathered they collected each other's writings, and then they would critique them, and they would pass them back and forth. And their um, their writings were a big contribution to American study, and they were also like showed the emerging like literary and cultural identity of America. But so there was like four sections of the book, and so um, the collections like address the development and the writings of social and religious issues. And then in I think it's the fourth issue or the fourth section of the book, she talks about, or the girls are talking about like the noisy, referring to like the characteristics of the American identity. And um, it was kind of interesting because I can relate as a woman, and you just, especially right now with all this immigration issues and stuff, it just kind of makes you think that, relate to these women and what they were thinking in their poems and little entries that they wrote. Um, and this is a quote: "The noisy diversity of opinion that is one characteristic of American identity." And I thought that that was interesting because I kind of feel like that now with everything that goes on. However, after taking this class, I feel like I know a little bit more, and so, or a lot more. So I'll definitely have an opinion now. Um, let's see. And so that brings me to my last um, source, which is my friend Karina Mateo, and she is a Romanian. Uh, they came over as Romanian refugees, and so they were granted political asylum. Her father came first, and and he came like a couple years before her mom and her brothers and sisters came. Um, but it was interesting because he also wanted to come over and have a better life for his family. And so he came over and he started a business. And then eventually the kids and Karina's mom came over. And she said it wasn't hard for her to assimilate because she was only like 2 years old. And then she attended school here, and then I met her in nursing school. So we have a lot in common, and so I thought it was interesting when reading about the Quaker women and how they went back and forth and talked. Karina and I kind of do that too, and talk about politics and everything that's going on. So anyway, what is my argument for my what is my thesis argument? And I started thinking about it, how hard it was to come up with something. But the one thing that I could come up with was um, that we will never be able to identify what an American is, or like define what an American is. I don't think we'll ever be able to do that because it's kind of like Dr. or Professor Van Cleve says that we are all in a melting pot, and I kind of picture the same thing. But so what you put in, you're going to get a whole rainbow of flavors that come out. And that's the way I look at it. So I think that each person's story and where we come from is just a little small piece of the definition of what an American is. So I don't think there will ever be a true definition of what an American is. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you and good luck.